What's up everyone and welcome back to HateWatchers. Today we're trying something new with our first ever monthly review roundup. The idea here is to go over everything we've watched over the last month, recapping some of the shows and movies that we've made videos about, as well as briefly discussing those that we didn't review on the channel. We actually do watch a fair bit more than we talk about here, but a lot of things either don't really warrant much of a discussion or elicit strong feelings one way or the other. So this roundup will give us a chance to get our thoughts out on a few more things, as well as reflect on what we've already reviewed. The plan is to do this monthly at the end of the month, and it's a new series for the channel, so be sure to leave any feedback in the comments. And of course, be prepared for minor spoilers on the shows and movies contained herein, but nothing that should ruin the show or movie. So without further ado, let's get right into the review roundup for February. We'll kick things off with a release from the beginning of the month that we didn't end up talking about on the channel, Argylle. We suffered through it, and in vain in the end, as we didn't even deem it worth reviewing. It's just one of those movies that wasn't terrible enough to warrant a discussion and a warning to steer clear of it, and it wasn't good enough to recommend. And most importantly of all, it was a movie that few in their right minds would have expected to be anything different than what you saw on the surface. Everyone should have known as soon as they saw Bryce Dallas Howard that this would be a middling to bad action comedy that would also be a pseudo-Hollywood circle jerk, as her projects are wont to be. And this one was little more than an excuse to travel to Greece on the studio's dime. I'll be fair in saying that this movie wasn't as terrible as it could have been, but that doesn't mean it was good. You could argue it had some good moments and elements, but they were few and far between. And the bad moments were real bad. We thought it was pretty much exactly what was advertised and what viewers should have expected. Although we would be remiss if we didn't recognize Bryce Dallas Howard's commitment to the role, as she beefed up to portray a single cat lady. Madam Web was another movie that we felt was exactly what was expected, embarrassingly bad, and we drove that point home a number of times in our review. The phrase, "what did you expect?" was all that came to mind when the credits rolled. It did dive further off the deep end than Argylle by the end of it, however, with a laugh-out-loud scene at the end when Madam Web herself is inexplicably wheelchair-bound and wearing Stevie Wonder glasses, so that alone probably drove us to make a video about it. And the cherry on top was that the lead actress didn't even seem to want to be associated with the movie, as Dakota Johnson single-handedly drove the press tour for the film into the ground with her unenthusiastic remarks about it. Other elements like an incredibly lame villain, the lack of any real direct confrontation, and 3 teen girls who don't even have their superpowers yet further cemented Madam Web in its rightful place at the bottom of the ocean. Probably the last entry in this roundup that went pretty much as anticipated was the Super Bowl. When viewed through the lens that maybe, just possibly, the NFL is now fully an entertainment vessel rather than a competitive sports league, the Super Bowl looks real suspicious. Supposedly the highest viewed live broadcast since the moon landing, Super Bowl 58 had it all. A Chiefs team who lost to some of the league's worst teams earlier in the season relied on their best player, Taylor Swift, to overcome adversity and pull off miracle win after miracle win to reach their 4th Super Bowl in 5 years, winning their 3rd in those 5 appearances. The game was complete with 11 cuts to T-Swift in her luxury box, a key 49ers defensive player blowing his Achilles when just jogging onto the field, this piece of shit assaulting his coach, blown calls, a walk-off touchdown, and of course, a missed extra point that allowed us to go to overtime, which lets the networks rake in even more of that all-important ad money. Tie it all up with the wall-to-wall coverage of Taylor Swift's totally organic relationship all season, and the fact that sports coverage has devolved into pretty much just sports betting and fantasy sports, and you'd have been a fool in retrospect to bet on anything but a miracle Chiefs win. Especially when there's a whole new season of insurance and Subway commercials for Mahomes and McKelsey to star in on the horizon. The whole thing leaves the NFL feeling as fake as it ever has. But at least it's helped our earlier video on the NFL age like fine wine. Which brings us to another complete fantasy show, Halo. All the buzz going into this new season was that the show is leagues better than it was in its first season. We've been covering this show episode by episode, so you can watch those videos for a deeper dive into what's going on with it. But so far, halfway through the season, we're not seeing this vast improvement just yet. We haven't seen the full season as some of those early reviewers supposedly have, so at this point we might not have as complete an insight as they do, but it's still plagued with the same major problems as the preceding season. It's mired in uninteresting storylines of minimal consequence involving tertiary characters. Master Chief is full of emotions and out of his armor more than he's in it. He now has no relationship with Cortana, which could be argued to be an improvement over the crappy relationship the two had in Season 1. And respecting and honoring the lore that birthed the successful franchise in the first place is pretty much out the window. There are some minor improvements in terms of the tone, the visual feel of the show, the dialogue, etc. But these are all small potatoes in comparison to the changes that needed to be made to win back alienated fans. The most recent episode was better able to mask those problems by drowning them out with near non-stop action, and it certainly was the best episode of the season up to this point, but it was just a baby step toward realizing what this show could have been. There was a lot of hope with bringing in a new showrunner who supposedly has more reverence for the source material, but it hasn't panned out just yet. We'll see how the season wraps up, but we'd be remiss not to still be skeptical about it. Long story short, if you're a longtime Halo fan and rightfully had issues with Season 1, Season 2 isn't going to change your mind about the show. Now, True Detective Night Country is definitely the biggest disappointment of February. Our reverence for the True Detective brand is largely misplaced thanks to the high regard we hold Season 1 in, and we admitted as much in our spoiler-free review. That said, no amount of being realistic about the quality of the franchise as a whole could have prepared us for what a shit show Night Country ended up being. Even given an incredibly intriguing setting in northern Alaska where the residents live without sunlight for months, Night Country really didn't have much else to offer viewers. The captivating detective work that Season 1 handled masterfully was an afterthought for this show, as it instead opted to lean into its interpersonal relationships of side characters and other such tripe. Also, part of the enjoyment in shows like these comes from following the case intently, theorizing whodunit, trying to figure out what the hell happened and why. And this show pretty much left that aspect out entirely, meandering its way towards the finale as it left viewers with no idea what had happened until the final scenes. And then came the finale. It's been a while since we've had a good laugh, but this finale delivered. It gave us probably the dumbest ending imaginable for this show, just barely beating out the "it was all just a dream" twist. The solution to whodunit was laughably stupid, and I'd say it came out of nowhere, but that's not true. The creator Issa Lopez absolutely pulled the ending out of her ass, so that's where this turd came from. Combine all that with the show leaning into the idea of a supernatural explanation and cheap hollow fan service references to the first season, and it's clear that this show should have been left to freeze to death in the Alaskan tundra. And to top it all off, we get the absolute shit-covered cherry on top as the creator and writer for Night Country, the aforementioned Issa Lopez, failed so completely with this show that, as is all too common in Hollywood, she failed upward. She's now been given creative control of the next season of True Detective. And with that news, we're comfortable saying that True Detective is well and truly dead. But if nothing more, the next season of True Detective should be good fodder for our channel. The newest show that we started watching is Shogun on FX. A remake of the 1980 miniseries and 1975 James Clavell novel of the same name, Shogun takes us to feudal Japan in the 1600s, when an unashamedly Protestant Englishman arrives, apparently in search of fist-fighting every last Catholic Portuguese to ever set foot in Japan. Feudal Japan is always a great, romanticized time and place to tell a story. Throw in warring samurai, and you have the makings for a great show. Through the first 2 episodes, it's okay, nothing special just yet, and a bit slow to start, but we're optimistic for what this show can be. And we intend to see this first season through to the end. The show seems to want to lean into the Game of Thrones model of political intrigue spiced up with war and sex, so time will tell us if they manage to pull off something akin to the first 5 seasons of Game of Thrones, or the last 3 seasons. Although the first part of the second season of Invincible aired in November, we only just caught up to it over this last month. The first season surprised me and my friends, and we had a lot of fun watching it. This second season, however, seems to have lost some of its charm or its novelty. The often gruesome animated series really seems to have missed the presence of Omni-Man, this world's morally ambiguous, ostensibly evil Superman stand-in. He came back in the last episode of Part 1, and the show seems markedly better with his return. He'll be present for the second half of Season 2, which returns in March, so we'll be keeping an eye on that. Another show that we watched from front to back was Mr. and Mrs. Smith on Amazon Prime. Nothing here really warranted a review from us, but we watched it, so you have to hear about it for 30 seconds. A TV adaptation of the same idea brought to us by the Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie movie of the same name, the show is about 2 spies that are set up as a fake husband and wife. The 2 complete various missions for the shadowy agency that employs them, and eventually find themselves actually in love, which brings a whole new level of complication to their work. We thought that while the show wasn't great, or even good for that matter, it's slightly better than what we had expected. The whole thing has Donald Glover's fingerprints all over it if you're familiar with the comedian/rapper/actor/writer/producer's work, which I was very familiar with beforehand. To sing a few notes of praise for the show, it had a surprisingly high production quality, and it definitely doesn't slow walk the action or the conflict, thrusting the main characters into high-stakes situations pretty early on. And there's a lot of meat on the bone with 40-plus minute-long episodes. Still though, we're not too high on the show, and we think you'll be fine skipping it. The ending was ambiguous enough to say that a second season is definitely on the table though. And we watched Alexander. It was pretty gay. In this last section, we want to mention some of the things that we've been watching just on a personal note for our own enjoyment, or things we've been watching in preparation of reviewing something else, like a sequel. First off, personally, I stay up to date on the Curse of Oak Island about the ongoing treasure hunt on an island in Nova Scotia. Long ago, I got enamored with the history behind the search for treasure, and have been watching the show ever since. It's just a simple, formulaic, somewhat dramatized series chronicling the current search, but I find it interesting enough to follow casually. It's a good thing to have on in the background as I work. Next up, I tried to get back to Hell on Wheels, which I had never watched before. I'm in the second season, and it's a cool show set in a great period of time, so I like it so far. Let me know your thoughts on the show in the comments if you watched it. I'm interested to see what people thought of it. Last up, I watched 2 movies in preparation of reviewing upcoming films, the first being Dune, and the second being Ghostbusters Aftermath. Dune I've seen a number of times. We really like it, and personally, watching this one video by Alt-Shift-X after seeing the first movie gave me a whole new appreciation for the film. I was a complete outsider to the world of Dune before the 2021 movie, only having a rough idea what it was and how it had helped inspire George Lucas in making Star Wars. And while the Dune movie is good on its own, seeing this video dive into the differences between the movie and the books, the real-world inspirations behind Frank Herbert's fictional novels, and how subtly
Denis Villeneuve. Denis
Villeneuve worked key elements of the books into the film, it all helped immensely in appreciating the movie. I'll link the video in the description below, and if you have any interest in the world of Dune, I highly recommend you give it a watch. Lastly, in preparation of Ghostbusters Frozen Empire releasing this coming month, I watched 2021's Ghostbusters Aftermath, which I hadn't seen. I thought it was decent, not incredible, but fine. Obviously, it's light years ahead of Ghostbusters 2016, but the film of JFK's head exploding is a better watch than that dumpster fire. I wouldn't say I'm champing at the bit for the next Ghostbusters, but I at least don't have a bad taste in my mouth going into it. Well, that about does it for our February review roundup. As you can see, we watch a lot of stuff to review for the channel, for our own enjoyment, and for pseudo-research for upcoming shows and movies. Let us know in the comments what you thought about anything on this list, and let us know about anything you've watched over the last month and what you thought about it. Also, let us know if you like the idea of these monthly roundup videos, and if you think we should add anything to them. As always, remember to like the video if you liked it, and consider subscribing to HateWatchers for future TV and movie reviews. Thank you for putting a wrap on Black History Month with us today, and we'll catch you in March.